Hello all you rotting corpses, as always I am Cosmic, and today we're going to be previewing Dead Age, a new survival RPG developed by Silent Dreams and published by Head Up Games. The indie survival RPG is currently on early access and is set in the midst of a zombie apocalypse. The game itself is set to be in early access for around 3 months, as the developers have pleaded that they don't want to be one of those games that becomes an endless early access game. However, only time will tell if that is actually the case. That being said, of course, the game has received a very positive reception from both critics and users alike. So let's get down to it and see why people like Dead Age so much. I have to say that straight off the bat, when I first heard about Dead Age and I heard the words zombie and survival game, I thought, oh god, this is going to be mind-bogglingly boring, because ultimately I am so done with survival games and zombie games in general, because they are tedious, they lack innovation, and ultimately they, like early access, tend to be early access games that have no end in sight. That being said, I have to say that Dead Age was a little bit of a surprise to me when I first played the game. I wasn't expecting it to have turn-based RPG mechanics, which is something that many of you know I absolutely adore. And I have to say that I felt that the whole experience and the execution of the game, even in its early state, has been something of a really positive experience. So you start the game and you create a character. Now this character, you can unlock more variations of characters, so you have to start off with a student, and as you progress in the game you can unlock characters for your next go, such as a soldier or a medic, etc, etc, and they each start with different stats and abilities. Now once you've created your character, you head into the game and the storyline progresses and you get straight into the thick of the action, which is something I like. I like games that just throw you right into the midst of it and say, go, let's get this done. And ultimately what Dead Age becomes is something that is part survival, part traditional turn-based RPG, and those things mixed together with the zombie apocalypse setting actually make the game feel somewhat fresh compared to its rivals in the zombie survival genre. So when you're not fighting and in the midst of combat, you are at your camp. Now your camp has several things to do. You can manage your party, you can manage your inventory. The game has crafting, so you have skill points that you can put into crafting jobs, which will allow you to access certain jobs like gunsmith or blacksmith or guard or hunter, so you can hunt for food. And each of these jobs allows you to essentially create items or gather resources in a certain way. On top of that, you also have your character skills, so you have proficiencies in, for example, handguns or assault rifles or melee weaponry, etc, etc, and you can input points into these, and as you input points into them and you level a specific skill up, you are able to unlock in battle abilities. So for example, leveling up melee, the first ability you will get is Breakthrough, which allows you to apply a defensive buff onto an enemy for 2 turns. It has to be said straight off the bat that it's fairly simple, it's clean, and it works really well. And I have to say that while the game doesn't do anything particularly new, particularly innovative, what it does do is it does its execution really well. It creates a game that all of the mechanics in tow are something that you've seen before, and you've seen many variations of before, but it works really well. Once you get into the combat itself, it's a fairly simple setup. It's turn-based, you select your ability, what you want to do, and you go forth, you take your turn, the enemy takes a turn, and whoever's left standing wins. It's a fairly simplistic turn-based game. There's not much depth to it other than later on in the game when you have abilities that will complement each other. For example, using Breakthrough to apply a defensive buff and then using a high damage ability to capitalize on that defensive buff. But other than that, there's no special real mechanics to it in any sense of the word. It's very simplistic, but ultimately it is fairly satisfying, and it makes the game feel a little bit fresh and a little bit new, something a little bit new out of something old. So you have, zombie survival, which has been done to death. You have turn-based RPGs, which have been done to death. You have survival resource mechanics in the game that have been done to death, but you put them all together and the game feels somewhat new, it feels exciting, and that in itself is something that is worthwhile about the game. The difficulty of the combat works very well in the game's favour. The game is somewhat challenging. It goes in kind of ups and downs, in peaks and valleys, where it will be challenging and then you will level up enough to have a certain area become not so challenging anymore, but then you'll get onto the next area where it does become challenging once again, and it works kind of like that. It's fairly straightforward. There's nothing particularly exciting about the combat in terms of, wow, that was amazing. There isn't those real moments in there. I would like to see the developers put something in there that makes the combat a little bit special, maybe the occasional real big boss battle, or some unique mechanics that happen every now and again to make the entire thing a little bit more exciting. So for example, you could have you have a day and night cycle in the game, so you could have at night maybe characters' accuracy is down, or perhaps damage is increased during the day, and zombies move faster at night, or something like along those lines, just to make it a little bit more interesting and ultimately let the combat have a little bit more depth and breathe a little more. After the combat, you also return to your camp and you have to manage your resources. So depending on how many survivors you have to always make sure that they have enough food, that you have medical supplies, that you have goods to trade, and all of these things take time. So the game works itself in days, so you go day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and you can do a variety of things in those days. You can assign people to a specific job and to craft something in particular. Once you've assigned someone to craft, that will take them their entire day. So you have to manage who you're assigned to what carefully, because the same people that you're assigning to craft things are also the people that you need to take into battle with you. And if you assign all of your party members to crafting, then you'll be going into battle alone, which is not a great idea. You'll of course have to go outside into the outside world to find resources, find materials to be able to craft things, and of course to find food. Now the great thing about the game, one thing that I really enjoyed, was the fact that when you choose to travel somewhere like the highway or somewhere else, you are able to go through it, and it's in stages, so you get like 20 levels to go through in that particular stage, and as you progress in each battle, after each battle you may come across an event, and that event, maybe you stumble upon a bus, and then you go into the bus to search for materials and stuff, and you find that it's actually been ransacked and it's been trapped by survivors, and they come and attack you, that kind of thing. And I really like those events taking place, even though a couple of the events are reused and recycled. It still adds a little bit of fun to the actual adventuring part of the game. I also enjoyed the way that the game's story is told, so you have really nice hand-drawn art, and it's all very text-based. I wouldn't mind a little bit of voice acting in the final product. I think that would add to the overall experience, but I think it's not necessarily necessary to have voice acting in this particular game. The last thing that I really wanted to talk about is, of course, the aesthetic and the art style, the music. Now, I really like the way the game's hand-drawn art works. It's very cartoony and it appeals very well. I think it works very well. The actual in-game graphics, when you get to things like the combat itself, they are not great. They are very ugly. I mean, it works okay in the sense that they're ugly and it's a zombie apocalypse, so everything's supposed to be ugly. But I wouldn't mind maybe either a little bit more sheen and polish on those assets that they've got currently in there, or maybe changing the art style to more of a cartoony aesthetic, which also would work very, very well. The sound, however, is something that I feel lets the game down in a big way. I think that the sound effects, they're okay, they're mediocre at best, but they don't particularly inspire anything fantastic. And I think what this game needs is some really great sound effects and a really good musical score. I think a musical score in this game would be a key element to just giving it that little extra something to make it great. And I think what ultimately needs to happen is a complete redo of the sound effects in an ideal world. add some effects that are going to be really creepy and give you a certain amount of tension, because ultimately what's occurring in the game at the moment is that you are fighting zombies and there's a distinct lack of tension. And I feel that what great zombie survival games do really well is they add a lot of tension to whatever combat system they have, and I think that you can add tension to a turn-based game. Ultimately, you need a great sound effects and you need great soundtrack for that, and I think a little bit of tension and a little bit more atmosphere in those battles would just add something, a really nice touch ultimately to the game. But ultimately I have to say that the game has impressed me thus far. I think that it has a great amount of potential. I really hope that they finish the game in such a way that it adds rather than detracts to its value. I hope that they take the criticism of myself and others and really try and change a couple of things up in the game just to make it a little bit more interesting, to increase the longevity of the game. But ultimately what they've got is they've got a basic recipe here for a great indie survival RPG, and I like the fact that they have taken well-trodden mechanical ground and turned it into something that feels new, and that is an impressive feat from an indie studio. So that is my preview for Dead Age. Thank you so much for watching and listening. As always, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do subscribe and like, and as always, I will see you next time.